the District Assembly Common Fund and the Mineral Development Fund are the most significant disbursements or source of revenue for responding to problems at the district level. So be it education, be it health, which we see as the most challenging problems in the communities. Beyond what central government does, the assemblies will need control, they will need budget and allocations to be able to address those specific challenges that they do have in those communities. So per our interaction with the communities and their demand for development, we began asking the questions, where is the money to actually address those specific challenges that the communities do have? How do you mitigate the impact of people moving into the mining communities, putting so much pressure on infrastructure, education, health infrastructure? How do you address those specific challenges if enough revenues are not going to those communities? So we sought to track the disbursement of central government funds to these communities to see how adequate they are, how regular they are, to be able to address those challenges. And I think subsequent presentation will show how poorly we are performing as a country in terms of responding to a disbursement to these communities for them to be able to address the specific challenges that they have. We seem to be centralizing expenditure as a country. So even though you have the District Assembly Common Fund as a constitutional obligation on the state, to disburse 5% of revenue to the communities, over time, central government is centralizing the expenditure of that money. And some of those expenditures really do not have specific bearing on some of the communities. For example, if you take a portion of the DACF into a central pool for national expenditure, how a community benefit from that money that should have gone to them becomes something that we can all question. So we want to provide the evidence and the data so that we can engage further with the communities, with the chiefs, with stakeholders and policymakers, particularly Parliament, where all the laws are passed. If you check the DACF, consistently new laws are being passed to take up a portion of the DACF, rendering it ineffective in essence. Because if you have an assembly in a year running a budget of about 2.5 to 4 million Ghana cedis, that is woefully inadequate to address any developmental needs of those assemblies. So if we're going to take decentralization seriously and ensure that we are able to address context issues and problems, then we have to look at how much we actually send to the assemblies. The Constitution talks about a minimum of 5%, and we are struggling to even do that minimum. It tells you that we have to really look at the decentralization all over again to be effective at addressing the local challenges that we do have. And it's not just the DACF. If you look at the MDF also, disbursements you will see has been woeful, and consistently again we are passing laws and policies that makes it difficult for revenue to flow from the MDF to support local development. So I thank you for being here, and I hope that at the end of the day we should be able to concretely define a pathway for ensuring that these assemblies would be empowered to really engage in their own thinking what development should look like with adequate financing. So I thank you, and I hand over to Jasper.
Thank you very much, Ben, for this wonderful introduction. We want to invite Mr. Abdul Karim Mohammed. Thank you very much, Ben, for the introduction. We want to invite Mr. Abdul Karim Mohammed, and he's the country manager for IBP, and he's our partner for this project. So we will invite him to give us some few words. Mr. Karim.
Thank you very much. Opportunity to say something very short. First of all, I want to thank all the on this call for making time part of this and for us to engage each other and understand the issues and also identify solutions together. Now, as international budget partnership, what we focus on is how to use fiscal governance, mostly, the budget as a tool, as a critical tool for ensuring inclusion and also capturing citizens' priorities, development priorities towards enhanced service delivery. I think the main issues on this subject matter at hand has been elaborated by Ben. But what I just want to add is that we didn't want this conversation to be held in a vacuum, because there is a constituent within the mining affected communities who have interest in all this discussion that we are having. And that is why we are working together with WACAM, which is a broad membership-based organization. So with all the technical analysis that have been done by ACEP, we have a constituent that takes up the issue and understand that they are well connected to it, not just as mere recipients of service delivery in their communities, but as active participants in the decision-making process as to how these services are delivered. And with this particular issue, where our focus is to look at the resource flow. And as Ben stated, we identified that the two main sources of funding are the District Assembly Common Fund and the Mineral Development Fund for the mining affected districts. Now, we realize that there are major fiscal gaps that need to be addressed if our ambition for enhanced service delivery in the health and education are to be realized. And for that to happen, we needed to engage you, who are the key players. You understand the issues, you have a lot of the answers that we are seeking, and that will make our engagement more fruitful. It will be informed by the realities on the ground, and out of that we can identify common solutions that we can use to address the challenges and enhance the welfare of the people on whose behalf we are all working. So I'm very, very excited to be part of this meeting, and I look forward to a very fruitful deliberation going forward. Thank you, everyone, and I wish all of us a productive session this morning. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Karim. We'll quickly zoom into our presentation, and we would quickly want to start. Okay, so our presentation is basically on the challenges in the District Assembly Common Fund and disbursements in Mineral Development Fund. And we want to look at the implications for local governance and then decentralization in Ghana. As we've all heard from our opening addresses, these two funding sources are critical and essential for these assemblies. And we want to see how delays in disbursements and some policies and initiatives by government has really reduced to the extent to which extent funding for these assemblies have been reduced by these policies. So a brief outline of our presentation. We are going to highlight, talk about provide an introductory background to this research, and then also we highlight on some socioeconomic impacts of mining, and we would quickly move on to discuss or analyze some of the revenues and from the selected districts. Then we will discuss government policies and legislations that do affect revenue flows to these assemblies. Then we provide a summary of our findings and also some recommendations. Afterwards, we would open up for discussions from you so that we can find the way forward and how much possible it will be for us to address some of the identified problems. Okay, so the concept of decentralization has become a constitutional aspiration of Ghana, and the local governments and the power of district assemblies, municipal assemblies have been highlighted in the constitution of Ghana, and they are mainly responsible for most of the development planning activities and also really championing the concept of decentralization within the districts, and they are responsible for the governance of the various districts and local units that they find themselves in. And the constitution also requires that these municipal, metropolitan, and then district assemblies are well equipped with the adequate and reliable resources in order to further whatever objective that they have to do in the course of their development planning and implementation. And financing is very important in this regard in meeting the needs and the priorities of the people that they serve. Subsequently, we have the Local Governance Act, which also prescribes 3 primary revenue sources to MMDAs. Mainly decentralized transfers, donations, and grants, and also internally generated funds. Bulk of the decentralized transfers comes from the District Assembly Common Fund, which has been explained as about minimum 5% of government's total revenues. We also have some donations and grants coming in from development partners and also the district's internally generated funds. Now, mining communities, as we see, have another advantage of obtaining additional revenue for development. And this is seen from the Mineral Development Fund. And this was primarily to cater for some of the socioeconomic imbalances that would occur as a result of the incidence of mining activities in this district. So mining communities obtain these additional funds by virtue of the Mineral Development Fund, which was established in 1993 and was further codified into law as the MDF Act in 2016. And that specifies certain amounts to be given to district assemblies and other state institutions from mineral royalties that are being paid by mining companies. Now, the District Assemblies Common Fund, as well as the Mineral Development Fund, are critical sources of revenue for mining districts. But then there are various challenges that we have seen to be exhibited within these funding sources. For instance, you have challenges with late disbursements. We also have challenges with sometimes inadequate disbursements, and also certain laws and policies that seek to reduce the amount of money that is disbursed into these funds. And the impact of these is primarily that they affect delivery of planned development programs and activities that should have been done or should have been planned and budgeted by the district assembly. Some of these things are affected because of the inadequacy of the funds that is given to them. And in this regard, there is therefore the need to really assess the impact of some of these policies and how it affects funding and how it ultimately also affects development planning and development implementation within our local sector. And in all of these things, it's important to highlight that these fundings are critical to ensure that we are championing the cause of decentralization by sourcing or resourcing our district and municipal as well as metropolitan assemblies. So basically, the objective of this study is to analyze the importance of the Mineral Development Fund as well as the District Assemblies Common Fund for development planning and implementation within mining communities. And also we want to assess the implications of government policies, policies that directly or indirectly reduce disbursements to MMDAs through the DACF and also the MDF. And our study and analysis was based on 3 mining districts. Africa Center for Energy Policy, we work mostly within the revenue resource governance framework, and we work closely within the power, mining, and then the oil and gas sector. So our focus is on the mining districts and for the focus of ACEP and the focus of WACAM. So we selected 3 mining communities. We have the Takwa and Swayem Municipality, Pristia Huni Valley Municipality, and also the Esutufi North District, which is located in the Ahafo region, and Takwa and Pristia are located in the western regions of Ghana. So these are really centers for large-scale mining activities, and they contribute over 50%, over 60% of Ghana's gold outputs that it generates. So these mining districts are very key districts when it comes to the activity of mining, and so when it comes to the disbursement of Mineral Development Fund, these districts are key. So this is the reason we selected these districts for us as part of our survey. But this notwithstanding, the issues of District Assembly Common Fund is something that cuts across all district and municipal and metropolitan assemblies in Ghana. So really, the findings of this study or the implications of this work could be translated to other districts, not necessarily the mining communities. So we want to highlight some few socioeconomic impacts of mining, and these issues have likely been considered and discussed in the literature that really talks about mining activities in Ghana. Within these districts, according to data from the most recent survey, which is the 2010 Population and Housing Census, we note that the mining and quarrying sector is really the second to the agricultural sector. The agricultural sector is the largest employer in mining districts, and the mining sector is the second largest employer in Takwa. It employs about 22.6% of the labor force, about 18% of the labor force in Pristia, and also about 8% of the labor force in Esutufi North District. Now, notwithstanding the employment potential, there's that increasing appetite for mining sector jobs, although the sector is it's not so much of a labor-intensive sector. That increasing appetite weakens the diversification in other sectors. So you see that people within the communities would want to gravitate towards wanting to work in the mining sector rather than the other sectors. We see that happening in most of the mining communities. And of course, the literature has really expanded on other negative impacts that talks about noise and air pollution and other social impacts, school dropouts, and most of these come as a result of various forms of illegal mining activities. And some of these problems and challenges that are faced within these communities can really be mitigated through adequate financing or adequate sources of funding. And therefore, we believe that the Common Fund as well as the Mineral Development Fund are important sources of funding that could help and address some of these challenges. And if they are adequately dispersed and they are also dispersed timely to the MMDAs, it could help to provide an important way to mitigate some of these challenges. So we want to analyze some of the revenues from the selected mining districts. We collected data from the 3 mining districts and we're looking at their revenues and the sources of revenues. And these are actual revenues and not budgeted revenues. We will deal with budgets as we move along. So these are some of the actual revenues they collected between the years 2017 and then 2019. And from the graph, you could see that the MDF and the DACF are very critical and important sources of revenue for the districts. In Asutifi North, for instance, the MDF contributed about 41% of their total revenues between 2017 and 2019. In Prestia, the MDF and then the DACF cumulatively contributed about 47% of their total revenue. And also for Takwa and Siam, the 2 funding sources contributed about 49% of the total revenue. Now you see that the category which is marked as others seems to be well above 50%. Now, this category largely includes the district development facility and also government transfers that are being used as compensations, payment of salaries, which do not necessarily directly go to the district to be used for development purposes. So if we take that amount of money out, and this constitutes between 20 to 30% of the district assemblies funding, depending on the year that they fall within. And if you take this component out of the revenue sources, there you can see how important the MDF and also the DACF are to the district assemblies in terms of development planning and also the implementation of these developments. And as we are aware, district assemblies have been moaned of challenges in collecting or generating their internal revenues. And so these funding sources become very essential for them in meeting the needs and then the priorities of the districts. Now, we've seen how important these DACF and then the MDF are within the revenue collection or within the actual revenues that the district assemblies receive. Now, we want to look at how important these funding sources are in terms of their budgets. And according to the program-based budgets in their the district medium-term planning framework, development planning framework, and these assemblies are required to prepare their budgets along 5 main program lines. We have management and administration, which basically looks at the administrative aspect of the district. You have infrastructure delivery and management, you have social services delivery, we have economic development, and then we have environmental management. Now, this figure, as we are shown here, is one that shows how each of the various sources of funding are distributed across the various program lines. So if you take the District Assemblies Common Fund, for instance, you would see that across all the districts that we studied and studied, that's Takwa, Prestia, and Asutifi, the District Assembly Common Fund is a very important funding source for management and admin. It is used under the infrastructure delivery and management program. It is used under the social services delivery program. It is used under the economic development program. And it's also used under the environmental management program. Basically, DACF is a source of funding that cuts across all the program lines for the district, across all the 3 district assemblies that we saw. And this information is obtained from the composite budgets of these districts. And this based on their medium-term planning framework between 2020 and then 2023. So you could see that in the medium term, in the short to medium term, the DACF is a very important funding source. So for even what they are expecting to get and what they're expecting to obtain in using to plan their development activities. And it is spread thinly across all the sectors and all the program lines. If you look at the MDF is largely used for infrastructure delivery and management. Although there are no specific guidelines on the utilization of the Mineral Development Fund, there's this resolution that among the district assemblies that MDF should be used for capital projects. And it's not surprising that we see MDF being consistently managed under the infrastructure delivery and management program of the budget across all the 3 mining communities or 3 mining districts. Well, we can also see that in some districts, the Prestia and then Esutify, we have MDF being marked as a source of funding for under management and administration, and also under social services delivery, which focuses on the delivery of health and other education and other social services. We could see the MDF playing an important role for the Tarkwa Israel municipality and also the Prestia Valley municipality. In the section of economic development, which focuses on job creation and enhancing the economic livelihoods of the people within the community, we also see the MDF as a contributor or a source of funding that has been proposed by the Prestia Valley municipality. So what this means is that basically it buttresses or it highlights once again the importance of these funding sources to the municipal assemblies and also the district assemblies that we are understanding. DACF cuts across all programs, across all the districts, and MDF is also largely important for infrastructure delivery and also social services delivery. And this means that if there are bottlenecks in their disbursements, if there are challenges in its disbursements, if there are reductions in the disbursement of each of these funds, this really goes to affect the delivery of projects, the delivery of planned programs for the district. And here we are talking about projects such as health delivery, infrastructure services delivery, and so on and so forth. Now we want to now discuss some policies and legislations that affect revenue flows to district and then municipal assemblies. So basically, we see that as we heard in the introductory aspects to this program, we've seen how some government laws and government policies have affected or reduced the amount of monies that should really go to the district assemblies to enable them undertake some of these development projects that they need to undertake. And we want to discuss, first of all, the Earmarked Funds Capping and Realignment Act. The Earmarked Funds Capping and Realignment Act, which was instituted at 947, instituted in 2017. And the object of the fund was to free up capital of some specific earmarked funds and to ensure that the amount of monies that is encumbered by these funds is capped at 25% of tax revenue. In other words, what this act sought to do was to provide an ability for governments to cap revenues or cap disbursements of monies to some earmarked funds, so that when you put all of these monies together, the money that goes to these earmarked funds is just about 25% of tax revenue. This, according to government and based on government's argument at the time, was that they are quite inflexible within their budgets, the ways they manage their budgets, and there are some rigidities that are introduced by many of the earmarked funds. For instance, if let's say DACF is supposed to obtain a minimum of 5%, and the minimum of 5% is sent to them, and in case they are not even able to fully utilize it, government finds it quite difficult to dip into these funds to use that free capital for other programs. So this act seeks to cap those funds and allow the government or the Ministry of Finance to be able to take money from these funds, take monies that have been allocated to these funds to be used for other things that the government wants to do. So they said there was difficulty in shifting public spending from one expenditure line to another, and even at times where it was necessary to do so. But what this act seeks to do also means that it introduces a certain top tier reduction in disbursements to these funding sources. And MDF and DACFs are part of these earmarked funds. And because they are part of these earmarked funds, if at any point they are capped, then what happens is that it's going to reduce the amount of funding that will be allocated to these MMDAs for them to use for whatever that they have to do. So the effect of the capping is primarily that the investment that are needed to be carried out in these districts are limited, and they would suffer from cost overruns. They will suffer from time overruns, because already what is actually due them has been capped right from the top before it's even disbursed to them for further deductions. And these are some of the funds that have been earmarked for capping. We have the National Health Fund, the Ghana Education Trust Fund, we have the Road Fund, the DACF, as you can see, is here, and we also have the Mineral Development Fund, and also a number of funds that are periodically capped based on how much government wants to obtain. Beyond the capping, which introduces a top tier deductions to the MDF and the DACF, the DACF also suffers from certain statutory deductions. And in 2019, the data showed that allocation to DACF, about 32% of the total allocation to DACF were allocated to other national projects and national policies. In 2020, we also saw that about 35% of allocation to DACF were further allocated to other national projects. And some of these include educational policies, Ministry of Local Government funding, the regional coordinating regional coordinating councils funding, payment of arrears under the Youth Employment Agency, the sanitation model. And also beyond these national projects, we have some national institutions whose legal framework allow them to source funding directly from the District Assemblies Common Fund. For instance, if you take the Youth Employment Agency, the Youth Employment Agency is under Act 887 sources 10% of its funds. They say that 10% of the DACF should be given to the Youth Employment Agency. And in 2020, about 8% of DACF was disbursed to this agency. The same thing also for NADMO, National Disaster Management Organization, who also takes about 3% of the District Assemblies Common Fund. And in 2020, about 1.42% was disbursed to the fund. We also have the National Youth Authority, which also takes about 5% of the DACF. So if you put all of these deductions in totality, then you realize that generally MMDAs actually have just about 50.4% of allocations to DACF actually being disbursed to them. And you should note that after these first level disbursements, we have to now disburse to each of the 260 MMDAs according to the specified formula that will be given by the administrator of the fund based on some metrics such as their basic needs, social pressure, responsiveness, and some equality factors that they also deem fit. So if you look at the quantum of money that goes into DACF, if it's affected by capping, that's one level of deduction. Then another level of deduction really is also these statutory deductions that emanate from the DACF that goes into other national projects and also other national institutions. And consistently, if we do not check this, then it becomes an attitude for governments to continually source funds from the DACF to fund other policies, and by so doing, you realize that the object of decentralization that we have decided to pursue will not be realized because we are not adequately funding these MMDAs to really do whatever that they are supposed to do as far as development planning is concerned, as far as meeting the basic needs such as health, such as education is concerned. And this becomes a problem if we allow consistently laws, regulations, and legal frameworks sourcing financing each day in and day out from the District Assemblies Common Fund. So in summary, what we see are the following: that the District Assemblies Common Fund and also the Mineral Development Fund are important sources of funds for MMDAs within mining communities. And although these funding sources are important, occasionally they experience significant delays in disbursements. Interactions with District Assembly officials brought out some of these things, that there are delays in disbursement. But fairly, if you compare disbursement in Mineral Development Fund and that of the District Assemblies Fund, we see that Mineral Development Fund disbursements are more timely comparatively, although they also experience some minimal delays as compared to the District Assemblies Common Fund. And as we saw across the district in the graph that we showed, you see that the funding from Mineral Development Fund is even larger than the District Assemblies Common Fund. And we've seen that this Mineral Development Fund has also been suffering from reductions at the national level, which you would see in the graph that comes at the next slide. So the introduction of laws and policies that absorb parts of the DACF and then the MDF at the national level will really erode these actual disbursements. And for certain context-driven developments that will be needed at the grassroots, at the local levels, will be missing because the sorts of funds that are needed by the assembly to undertake such big ticket investment, big ticket development planning, and even implementations will not be realized because of the limited funds that's available. So this is a graph that illustrates how these statutory reductions and top tier reductions have been impacted on by our main sources of funding, that is from the DACF and then the MDF. Now, to my left, we see that of the DACF. Originally, DACF is supposed to have minimum 5% of government revenue as is prescribed by the Constitution. Between 2017 and then 2019, which is the year under review that we were using for the scope that we were using for this work, we realized that about 4.7% of the government revenue was allocated to the DACF according to the budgets. So instead of the 5% allocation, the budget stated allocation of about 4.7. If you average the disbursements and if you average the allocations between 2017 and then to 2019, you get about 4.7%. And if you talk about actual disbursements to the fund, on the average, it has just been about 3.6% of actual revenues that have been collected by government. And beyond every reasonable doubt, the denominator that we are using as government revenue is basically tax revenue that we are using, and it's 3.6. So we realize that even if we are supposed to add other revenue sources to it, this percentage would really be reduced. So the actual disbursements into the DACF fund between 2017 to 2019 has just been about 3.6%, instead of the 5%, the minimum 5% that have been prescribed by the Constitution. And as a result of the deductions that we saw for national projects and all of those institutions that source funding from the District Assembly, we also see that basically the MMDAs would obtain just about 1.8% of the total revenue that is obtained by government. So although the Constitution has prescribed that 5% of total revenue should go to district assemblies to be managed by the MMDAs for the development of the various districts, you can see that in actual fact, it's about 1.8% of the total revenues that really go to these district assemblies. And you could see the difference. We are talking about 5%, and then we're also talking about 1.8%, which has quite a vast difference. That is even more than half. The district obtain less than half of what there is really supposed to be what is prescribed by the Constitution. And also, when you go to my right, you see that of the Minerals Development Fund. Now, ideally, the Mineral Development Fund is supposed to have you have a share of about 20% of the total mineral royalties that is paid to government. If you study the budgets between 2017 to 2019, these budget allocations, you will realize that we have allocated an average of about 12.3% to the MDF instead of the 20% allocation to the MDF. If you pay attention to these allocations, you realize that it has been reduced by about 7.7 percentage points. Then actual disbursement to the MDF has just been about 8.9% of the mineral royalties. Now, ideally, if 20% of MDF of royalties is disbursed to the Mineral Development Fund, and after each of the units, that is the Mining Community Development Scheme, the OSL office, the state institutions that are responsible for mining, our traditional authorities, after they have taken all of their share, the direct disbursement to MMDAs should have been ideally about 4.95% of mineral royalties. But then, because of the cuts in disbursements, in fact, looking at the 12.3% disbursement allocation from the budget and also the 8.9% actual disbursement to the MDF, you see that MMDAs obtain only about 2.2% of the total mineral royalties that is paid by the mining companies to government. So if you begin to pay attention to these figures, then you realize that over the years, MMDAs have quite suffered from revenue disbursements and actual disbursements to them. If you compare what is required to be disbursed by the Constitution and also by the MDF Act, and compare it to the actual disbursements to the MMDAs, you see a significant reduction in these disbursements. And as a result, this are primarily our recommendations, that looking at the importance of DACF and then the MDF, we recommend that they should be excluded from legislation such as the realignments, the capping, EMR funds capping and realignment and acts, and further or future legislations that would encumber these funds, because as we constantly pass new laws and new acts, new institutions come on board, if they keep on sourcing financing from the DACF and probably from the MDF, then really we are going to cripple the concept of the object of decentralization, and development to the local development at the local levels will not necessarily be realized. So consistently, the passage of new laws that allow the states to reassign portions of these DACF and MDF continue to reduce the amount of revenue that is available to these units, and essentially it makes it difficult for them to fund these local development activities and also really achieve the object of the MDF and then the DACF. And as a result, because of the challenges that we've seen as far as delays in disbursements and then the amounts that is disbursed is concerned, we also want to recommend that government should timely disburse the funds to MMDAs, and so as to prevent certain delays as well as cost overruns, budget overruns on project execution at the local level. Thank you very much, and I'll hand over to Mr. Ben Boachi to continue with the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles, for such detailed presentation. I think the evidence has been present, like I did indicate from the beginning. We are systematically rendering the decentralization agenda, ineffective. So we are paying people at the assemblies to manage budgets that cannot actually achieve development from their own plans and what they think development should look like for their communities. So if you have communities demanding that the assemblies would engineer development, they don't have the financing to be able to deliver that. And also the new laws and policies that are actually emerging to shrink allocation and disbursement to the assemblies, we don't have any end in sight as to when government will cease churning out new policies. Because when they wake up with a new policy and they want to implement, they look for DACF to cut, or they look for MDF to cut. And you have new policies and, like a Japan and a further attack on mineral royalty. The danger is that communities may eventually not get any money. So you have assemblies sitting there waiting for central government to send money, and it never actually goes. So this conversation is really important for us to rethink policy to ensure that we can deepen the decentralization, because context is really important. The people know what their problems are, and accountability also can be deepened by ensuring that the central government holds the local authorities accountable for what they spend. If you spend on their behalf, who is going to help hold those people accountable, for the budget? So that is the evidence. That's the finding from the work that we have done. And at this point, I would want to open it up for more conversation on how we can change the trend. And if there are specific questions on this presentation also, it can be put forward for us to deliberate on and see the way forward. So I will open up the conversation. If you want to ask a question or contribute, you raise your hands. But I also appreciate a response from the institution, particularly the MDF Secretariat, the DACF, and then OSF, sorry. Thank you. So who is going first? Let me see who is on this. Okay. Hello?
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm Abdallah.
Abdallah, yes, please go ahead.
I have a question to ask. I joined very late, but when I joined, I saw the figures being presented. That what is supposed to come is 5%, and what actually gets to the MMDA is 1.8. Striking the difference, if my math is correct.
Hello.
I had hello. If my mathematics is correct, then the difference is 3.2.
Yes.
So what happens to that? Where is it? Because I'm asking this question because when the MDF board was maybe launched at Kenya, a money was given that it was a seed money. So I didn't understand why MDF should come to the district, but when the board is launched, then the seed money is given. What informed that amount? I think it was, I don't remember exact figure, but it was around 1 million cedis. So was it actually 1 million that was supposed to be given, or it was more than that, and part of it was given as seed, and then the rest will be coming later? In fact, this has shown me that if actually some doesn't come like this, then I want to know what happened to the 3.2 that was out, which was not able to reach the district. That is my question.
Okay, yes, Abdallah, I think you're probably missing the DACF and the MDF. So the MDF, the total allocation to the fund is supposed to be distributed between state institutions and the assemblies, and then also the chiefs and all of the other beneficiaries. But what should go to the assembly actually should have been the 4.95% of the royalty. And what we noted from the budget and also the receipts of the assembly is that in reality is about 2.2% that goes to them instead of the 4.95%. And if you take the 20%, which should go into the fund, it's about 8.9 that actually gets disbursed into the fund. But the one you talk about, the 3.2 on the DACF side, we indicated that consistently government has been passing laws and policies to hive off a portion of the allocation to the District Assembly Common Fund. And that has made it difficult for the assemblies to receive the money at their end and utilize it for local development. So in reality, what goes to the assembly or what gets to their account is about 1.8% instead of the 5%, because new laws are being passed to hive off, a percentage of the constitutionally mandated minimum 5% that should go to the assembly. So that is the point that we sought to actually highlight. The specific
So
case that you mentioned, those are issues we can interrogate further because we don't have the details on that. But in reality, what we say is that you don't have the 4.95 going to the assembly, which they could have used for development. And that
so what is the
again by further policies that could come because we don't see an end in sight. Yeah.
So it means the laws that are made are continuously being changed. And it's just like somebody selling a sheep and still holding on to the tail.
We can put it that way. I mean, if you look at even the MDF Act was passed in 2016, right, to cede 20% of mineral royalty to the fund. By 2017, Parliament has passed a new law to allow the Minister of Finance to cap the MDF Act. So it looks as if we don't even reference our laws well when new ones are being passed. You know, how do you pass a law and in less than 5 months a new one is passed to render the one that was passed earlier virtually irrelevant? You know, so those are things we really want to highlight to see how we can engage our relevant stakeholders and authorities to ensure that these things don't persist.
Then it means it will become very difficult for some of these community people who normally don't have information to track, because within a short time a new law is made. So you'll be holding on to the old law that you are challenging something, and you go and they show you a new law. How do we, people who are in the community, track when these laws are constantly being changed? And I also make a recommendation that you follow up to where these boards were set in the mining communities to find out actually what happened. And instead of giving what the community deserved, you come with a seed money. It's a recommendation. We want to know why 1 million given. Was that the amount that was supposed to be given, or what? From above to the district.
Okay, so we'll track that for you and then get back to you on that specific. I heard the voice.
Yes, hello.
Yes, Dixon, can you come in?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boachi. Thank you for the wonderful presentation and the research. I want to know whether the money that is going to the district assemblies from the MDF component includes what they were supposed to get under the mining community development scheme as well, or it is just the portion they receive from the 50% that comes to OASL for disbursement. Thank you.
Yes, no, it doesn't. The one that is supposed to come to the OSL, so it doesn't include the scheme. So we were looking at what is supposed to go to the assembly directly, which they budget and plan for. So if you look at their budget, they anticipate their allocation from your end, and that is what we actually looked at.
Yes, hello, Mr. Bachi. Imano from the MDF here. All right, good to have you, and thanks to your team for a very good work done. And also, good morning to the other participants who have joined in this far. I understand that some issues have already been raised and questions have already been asked with respect to MDF. I'll kindly answer those questions when I finish with my submissions before that. First of all, like I said, thank you so much. We at the MDF Secretariat see this to be a very good opportunity and very good work done by your team as well, coming up with all these fact findings. In fact, at the policy level and at the ministry as well as such the MDF Secretariat, these are issues already that we've been contemplating on, and then our sector minister fronting and ensuring that we are able to address some of these challenges, issues about capping and all those things. So, I mean, I should say this is a timely, this is very timely for us, and also to Giorgio, and then all come to understanding and conclusion, especially with the recommendations that your team have put up. First of all, let me say the administrator himself, Peter Norizama, would have wished to have joined us, and also as the head of the secretariat, come up with this submission, unfortunately, is in a meeting with the sector minister, of course, preparing the sector minister for his voting in the coming weeks. He has, however, asked me to represent him and then make this submission. Like earlier indicated, we all understand the main objective of the MDF is basically to provide financial resources to for the socioeconomic development of these mining communities. Of course, without funds, our establishment is, let me say, meaningless. And of course, basically, if we don't have enough funds or receiving funds on time, of course, then like I said, the main fund, we will not be able to operate, I mean, as mandated by law in Act 918. So we understand all these things, and especially the findings you have come up with. Let me start off by indicating that, and also I'm sure this would answer one question that was raised by the last gentleman. Sorry if I didn't get on him right. He actually raised issues about the OSL funds. Section 21 of the Acts, MDF Act, permits that 50% of the MDF funds, which is 50% of the MDF funds, that's the 20% we receive from DRA, in this instance, the Minerals Income Investment Fund, MIF. 50% of it, which it's half of the money of the funds we receive, are given back to the OSL, which in this instance, the OSL also takes 55% of these 50% that they receive to the District Assembly. So in that sense, if you see money is, of course, being implemented at the District Assembly level by the MDF funds, they receive 55% of the funds. That is the 50% we send to OSL. That is quite distinct and different from the 20%, which Mr. Bachi earlier indicated. The 20%, which is also per the Section 21 of the Act, that mandates that the establishment of the Mining Community Development Scheme, which allocate 20% of these funds to the MCDS. Those ones are separate from the 55%. So these 55%, which is from the OSL to the District Assemblies, they manage it. Of course, your presentation indicated that most of them use it for infrastructure facilities, which is absolutely right, because I mean that's quite an amount of money. However, this is actually managed by the District Assembly, that's the DCEs themselves, and of course the Assembly. Let me put it this way. But the Mining Community Development Scheme, for the avoidance of doubt and clarity, it's managed by a committee, which we call the Local Management Committee. This committee is actually mandated for the board to establish it in Section 19 of the Act. That gives way for the locals themselves to understand, come up with their own kind of projects that they want to embark on. And then they send these projects to the MDF board through the Secretariat. When approval is given, they undertake this project. I'm sure those of you who, I'm sure a lot of you might have already seen the Act, but let me take time to explain and give you understanding of the composition of the Local Management Committee. We have the youth group, we have the women's group of the local area, we have the Minerals Commission rep, we have the mining communities rep, we have the traditional authorities, and as well. This gives us understanding that, of course, there's a fair representation. The idea is that the establishment, after at the moment, we've been able to establish 17 of these local management committees in 5 regions, including your sample areas that you indicated, Pristia, Talcoa, and Swayem, as well as Stephen, which we avoid.
Yeah, not to catch you, but I think on that specific point about the scheme, if you could rather focus on what the question that came up, why it is not fully functional. I think that would be
okay. All right. So very well. So the scheme is actually functional. We've established 17 of them as well. Like I said, from 2018 to now. The last we established was in December. That is the Fantiaqua South. Someone raised the issue about on what basis did we give some 1 million, for instance, Stupid North, which I had someone indicated. Of course, it's a seed capital we give to them because, like I said, the secretariats began operation from 2017. We have already received some monies from the Ghana Revenue Authority, that's 20%. We already received some money from them. And then to some, we started, inaugurating these committees from 2018. Of course, there is a need for us to give them some money to start operating with it, in terms of their meetings, in terms of engaging the locals, as well, getting their buy-ins in some of the things that they want to understand, because this is new. This is a very new thing that we are doing. And of course, we need to get the locals to buy in before. So we give them a seed capital just to start up with this. Before that, before monies are received to sent to these local management committees for their operations, there is these guidelines that we developed that they need to meet. We just don't send monies. We send monies to them based on the projects that they want to embark on. And when those projects have the buy-ins of the locals, they then go through this vetting process, and then they send it back to Accra at the ministry, at the board, when the board also subject to technical review. And then when approval is granted, then we're able to undertake this project. Currently, about 5.6 million Ghana cedis have already been sent to these 16 of the LMCs, with the exception of the December one, which we inaugurated, which we are yet to send monies to them. So those that we inaugurated before the trainings and all these things that per the guidelines that we need to, the LMCs need to abreast themselves with. We of course anticipated, the board anticipated that there is a need for us to send some monies, and of course that is the basis for which some of monies were sent to these LMCs for them to start work with and engage their communities. But back to the point of capping. Of course, we also face the issue of capping, just like you indicated, and that's something that is so worrying, because let me just take you through some facts from 2017. Per the 20% of money that are supposed to be sent to the Mineral Development Fund, that is about 666 million Ghana cedis, about 666 million. However, we've been able to receive only 379 million of these funds. They're implying that we have a deficit of 286 million. Of course, these are basically the point of the issues about the capping and all these things. That's why we are also affected. You can then understand that if these 286 million cedis, which is meant to, of course, portions of which is supposed to go to the communities, if we have them in our hand or in our coffers, we're able to send a huge amount of money, more than the 5.6 million that we've already sent to these local management committees for their operations. And of course, the district assemblies to the OSL, which they receive 55%. So we understand. But the way forward, of course, all these issues about what is the way forward, we ask. Before the end of office of the first administration of the president, our then minister, Honorable Koko Sumacheme, tried as much as possible to engage the Minister of Finance to make him understand that we need to actually do something about this. We've met in fact, we started this process before, and then there have been new change of ministers. We've not even have in office our minister yet, but unofficially we want to meet him. And of course, he's of the view that the mining communities really need to see a major development, of course, and that is also ensuring the vision of the president. And of course, he's ready to see to it that all these things are done. That's why I said this is very timely. And of course, these recommendations are very okay, which we're going to propagate to him that, look, these are, of course, some views even from the CSOs. And of course, they see to it that when issues of capping and other factors or other policies that government formulates, which hinders the MDF, as well as the District Assembly from receiving the needed amount of money for developmental projects to be undertaken, if these things are addressed carefully, it will go a long way to ensuring that the mandate of the MDF, which is to provide funds for socio-economic development, is really foreseen. And this is something key that which we've already seen that is on the heart of the incoming minister. We pray that we're able to get the nod, and then when he gets the nod, we're able to channel all these things and engage the Minister of Finance like he has indicated to do so. So this is just a brief input from the Secretariat to that. Well, I'm standing by for any questions as well that might come away for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the contribution. I think it's very insightful. But we'll proceed to listen to the DACF Secretariat, Ms. Cynthia Dagadu, if you're here. I saw your hand up.
Okay. Hello.
Yeah, so I called on Ms. Cynthia Dagadu to intervene at this point, and I'll come back to you.
Okay. Thank you. Hello.
Yes, please, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for raising our concern. Sorry?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. I'm saying that thank you so much for it. It has always working programs and things are building our accounts. And yes, there are government policies which the president has highlighted about they taking volumes of disbursement from the fund. But these are issues that go on like this. That there is a need to start. Hello? Institutions in the name of Capital Act 2007.
Okay.
And deduction sources for the various sources that bring a common fund. The fund was at the number of MMDAs was at 216. But currently, as we are talking, the number of districts are now 260. So the small cake is now being shared by a higher number of MMDAs, which also have effect on the quantum of money that goes to the assemblies. That goes to the assemblies. So the agitation or the lobbying is going on by the administrator. She's always saying, or anytime she gets the platform, she tries to make people aware that there is the need to increase the fund to its origin, or its the 7.5, the former 7.5%. And the local government select committee also does the same thing when they get the opportunity. And the incoming minister has been quizzed on the same issue, that if you add his voice to the increase in the number, the quantum of the fund. So I would say that this is a good forum, and to also ask you to add your voice to the existing voices that is going around for the increase in the quantum, and they need to look at those institutions that are taking away resources from the common fund. Thank you.
A very important intervention. Yes, so we are increasing the number of districts, and then we are reducing the share of national revenue to the district, the fund. So that makes it even much more difficult for development to happen as anticipated by the Constitution. So that point is really made. Do I still have Abdul Razak? Your hand is up, so you can go on now. You can unmute and then speak. Hello, Abdul.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello,
Yes.
good morning.
Yes, thank you.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Okay.
Menu from
Abdul, I think he came back. I called him earlier.
Yeah, yes, Ben,
Hello.
good morning. This is Bash from the Ghana Youth Secretariat. Hello. Yes. Okay. Yes. Thank you very much. I think let me first of all comment ACEP and welcome for coming out with this piece of research. I have just two interventions to make. One of them has to do with the issue of the Capping and the Realignment Act 947. To the best of my knowledge, I do know that the DACF currently is not affected by the capping law. So even though initially when the law was passed, it was it affected it and the formula was applied. But as we speak now, from where I sit, I know it doesn't. It's only the MDF. Of course, I'm happy to, because the EIT has also raised a similar issue as part of the recommendations that we made in our 2017-2018 reports. So it's good, at least there is something more, what do you call it, some kind of more recommendations to that effect coming. So I also want to say that I welcome the engagement started by the Minister of Lands and Natural Resources and MDF to engage the Minister for Finance and on this particular issue, because the DACF was affected, but I think through Supreme Court ruling and then maybe some engagement, that issue was resolved. So maybe they can also take a similar steps to address that. Then secondly, when I listen, even though I didn't listen to the whole what you call presentation because of some technical challenge, I was just wondering if it would have been also it would have been better if maybe you had also taken the opportunity to see or to factor in the contribution of property rate, because of, I mean, the work that we have been doing, especially in the mining districts. At property rates, especially within the mining installations, also contribute some significant revenue to support the development effort of the district assembly. So maybe in future research, it will be good or useful if you can also look at how the potential of property rates in terms of contributing to contributing, supporting what they are getting from the DACF and also the MDF. I think these are just the two issues that I want to raise. So I will rest my case here and maybe wait for the response. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bash. Yes, I get your point. The DACF, you're right. But if you check the allocation from the period that we reviewed, it falls short of the 5% as we indicated in the presentation. So we can really look at that to see what is actually impacting on the shortfall on the allocation. But it is still part of the law, you know, that the DACF can be cut by the minister. So that is where the challenge really is. That discretion is still part of our laws. You mentioned the Supreme Court ruling. I only know about the allocation of the ABFA to the DACF as part of government revenue. So we'll be happy to cite that case if it is different from that Supreme Court ruling to be sure what we are dealing with. The contribution of property rates, I mean, it's part of the IGF, and we note that it's a very significant source of revenue for particularly the mining communities. But the funds that are really under attack, you know, are the MDF and the DACF. I mean, even though they are raising money, which could be significant, sometimes $1 million from property rates and local taxes. If you really want to ensure development, all those streams that contribute or come together to ensure that communities can develop should be disbursed. And I think that is the focus of this research, and consistent reduction in allocations to the district assemblies eventually would render them ineffective at delivering development at those levels. So that's what we focus on the two. But I agree with you that those IGFs are also important. And in fact, the central government has consistently been motivating these assemblies to generate more IGF. But we do understand the challenge they have, that beyond the mines, really, the IGF is quite low, and they need capacity to be able to, over time, address those challenges that allows them to rake in revenues from the local community. So I get that point. It's really noted in the paper, but the two components that are really under attack are the DACF and the MDF. Yes. Sorry. So I'll call on Jonah now to come in. Thank
you. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Jonah, I can hear you. Hi. You muted again.
Oh.
Okay.
Hello, please, can you
Yes, we can hear you now.
hear me? Oh.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, Joanna from Prescribes. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
To you. Please, I have a question. From the first presenter, I heard something about the delayance of the divestment of the DFC, DACF, and then MDF. Please, may I know the challenges that the MMDAs have in terms of the collection of revenue districts? Hello.
Yes, I'm listening. I heard that
because that they are having challenging in terms of revenue collection in our district. So, what is the main source of the challenging that the assemblies have in terms of revenue collection?
Okay. Is that done? Are you done?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you. So, I mean, the assemblies, as Bash said, a bulk of the taxes that every assembly, the state is entitled to, is collected by the central government. There are property rates that can be collected by the districts. Some of the challenges that they do have really is sometimes state intervention, even when they want to crack down and go collect royalties. The independence to act has been cited as one of the examples, the problems that some of these assemblies really have, to be able to impose taxes at the local level, because their independence is really tied to a minister or the central government still. Those in the mining communities are able to get some revenue from the mining companies, but beyond that, the mining companies are also normal property rate from citizens that the assemblies can go and collect. But political expediency, makes it difficult for the local authorities to act. So that is a separate conversation that we will really need to open up to ensure that as part of the decentralization, these assemblies have the independence to really impose taxes and ensure that they deliver on those responsibilities. And also the component that the central government also has to send to the assemblies would also be delivered to them.
Hello, Mr. Abuache. Hello. Hello, Mr. Abuache. Yes, I understand what you are saying, but you see, when you come to a mining community like Prescribes Valley, please, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go on.
The assembly or municipality rely only on MDF. That is why they find it difficult to collect revenue from the citizens. And two, when you collect revenue from a citizen and you don't account for it, it is hard for them to also to pay. That is why our municipality is suffering from infrastructures like health facilities and education and other developmental issues. So my suggestion here is that can't we, as a country, make a law, a backing law for the country, so that can't we as a country make a law so that it will enforce the existing law for the government to release the MDF and then ADCF very early, so that the development projects can go on in our districts. I think you understand me.
Yes, I mean, I get your point.
You understand what I'm saying, eh?
Yes, I get what you're saying. I mean, for the delays, in their own frameworks, if you check the budget, they're supposed to be quarterly disbursements to the funds, but they don't come as regularly as they should. And these are conversations we need to have with the Ministry of Finance. And I'm sure Bash would agree with me that that is a major challenge, for the assemblies and the delays in the disbursement, because central government pays attention to its own challenges or expenditure items before these disbursements actually go. They also would say that as part of their responsibility, they pay the salaries of the workers through the budget, and therefore those items will always have to be prioritized before other disbursements are made. So part of the conversation will be, how do we appropriate the budget such that we can strictly follow those disbursement schedules to ensure that a portion at least go to the assemblies on time, because failure to deliver or disburse on time has implication for planned programs, and that result cost overruns and then also delays in project delivery in the communities. I do agree that accountability is really important, and I think that's what actually sparked this conversation, that the people at the grassroots development, and they are asking the assemblies for development. I think that accountability is being deepened at the district level. But again, when you are asking for the development, you also have to look at where the streams of revenue are, and to ensure that those streams are also coming in. I do agree with you that we have to hold the assemblies accountable for the money that they do receive. And I'm sure WACAM at the community level is working with some people like you and the rest of the community to ensure that assemblies can be held to account for the money that
Mr. Boachi. Mr. Boachi.
Yeah.
Mr. Boachi.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello, Mr. Boachi.
Yeah, Joanna.
Evacho. Mami can we with tree when can you why?
But you can.
But what tree?
But you much will be okay.
Mr. Boachi, Pacho municipality is Kawamu. Then person me change and say, Omo di omo to MDF na so. It's omo njeje kakra bi o na omo jeje. That is why Prisia Valley is suffering from Punchu emu. Person me change and say ekono municipal in municipal wom revenue wom was a collectors na jeje kakra omo je no kakra bi parts na omo je. And I quite assembly when almost somebody to workers, assembly staff and Casa Mofa on a canary, and a crabby no more support to more development, Moya has say. But they are coming in go. Don't want to go do hunting. It's assembly Nancasa so you know ye to say, 8 years. I was on to say, intimate from the Yakuno, Sikapo. Say, it quite strange. So, assembly no so into me born home so no on the a fair account for what did you know na you who star who could this will be one boof only what but so one and a crack the uncle phone will be
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we hear you loud and clear. I think her point really is that the assembly has to really up their game to ensure that they can collect the local level taxes and revenues to ensure that they can engineer development at their end and also remain accountable, most essentially, for the revenues that they collect at the local level. So that engagement is also another part of the programs that we are actually going to be running with the support of IBP in the coming days to ensure that the assemblies can also push to raise revenue. Because if you look at the budget, as you are indicating, a whole assembly is running a budget of 2 million Ghana cedis, 3 million Ghana cedis. That is woefully inadequate to actually engineer development in these communities. And I think it's a good call that we hold them to account for them to also generate more revenue beyond what the state is supposed to give to them from the central government. Do we have any other person before we run up? Kwaku? Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Wachi, my hand is up.
Yeah, Ben, I'm here.
Listen, let me take Kwaku and I'll come back to you. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Ben. Yes. Yeah. So I think we've all heard the findings from your research, and for me, what I am deducing is that it's more of government is not prioritizing the needs of these host mining communities, because these communities are essentially providing one of the major sources of revenues to government, which is the export of our gold resources to other countries. And we are not attending to the needs of those people who are actually really at the impact or at the mercies of the impacts of these mining activities. So for me, what I'm getting from your findings is that government isn't prioritizing the needs. And it's also a shame that they are also at the mercy of two statutory or legislative instruments that are, or to some extent, contradicting each other, and subject to the interpretation as to which one supersedes the other, or how it is even supposed to be done. These communities will continue to bear the brunt of whatever impact these mining activities are. And for us, it's very important because we need to attend to the health and educational needs of these communities. So whilst communities are yearning that they do get their shares, they are not really getting what is due them. So I believe at the national level campaign, there is the need to really continue with recommendations or the findings that you've also come out with the research, to see what really we can do to ensure that communities or the district assemblies receive this share so that they can equally impact it in their communities. Lastly, I also listened to the MDF Secretariat. WACAM has been working in mining communities for over 20 years now. I would want to share that I believe the MDF Secretariat should go down to let the people understand the new provisions in the 2016 Act. It's more of, yes, maybe they've given some seed money, there is this local monitoring committees, but to what extent do the larger populace in the district know of these funds? And these funds, this act was brought in with the LMC so that these communities can directly impact on what these funds should be used for. And I can say to a larger extent that most community members do not know of these provisions. And for that reason, most of the decisions is still left to the preserve of the district assemblies. So I believe the Secretariat should go down or partner or engage CSOs to a larger extent who can also reach down to to the communities so that we can equally share and let the people know that they have the right to participate in the decision making as to what these funds should be used for, so that we can equally address most of these challenges. So I will end here and hope that the findings that we have received would be opportunities for us to engage more with the MDF in getting the communities that are really impacted to participate in how funds should be used.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Goku, for the intervention. Mr. Abuja, you wanted to come in?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Boachi. I just want to add to the point that already is discussed, that the Capping Act is adversely affecting us. And then if I use OASL, for example, when the law was made, we made a strong case that per our provisions in the Constitution, our money couldn't be capped because we have a constitutional provision of 10%. And the powers that be agreed with us, so our monies are not capped at that level. But because the MDF is capped, then invariably you are capped at the end of the day, because whatever you are supposed to receive from there is capped, and it reduces how much you should get. And that affects provision of capital goods and all the like. So whatever we can do to take away the Capping Act and its effects from the bodies that are affected, I think it is welcome. The other thing I want to say is it is beyond, what I want to say now may be beyond the discussion now, but maybe for the future. I think we have to look at the capping law and see whether the monies that are being freed from there, have they achieved their purpose? Is that law actually helping develop? If it is not helping, then we have to scrap it off completely. But if it is helping, then so be it. So I think it's a discussion for another day, but I think it's something that should engage our attention. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. I think, Mr. Okaina, I will bring you in to also make a point. I think your hand is still up, so we can round up this conversation.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Benjamin. I think man was raised up. I raised up man during the first time I had to make the student, but that's fine. Just let me address Kuku Afari. I think is the WACAM rep here regarding the engagements with the communities at the local level. Yes, we agree. We again understand that this is new. Of course, it will take a long time for people to come to understanding of what we try to do or what the MDF Act is all about. Of course, we welcome the engagement with the collaboration and partnership with CSOs to ensure that we disseminate this information about the content of the MDF Act to the local level. But just to add on, before these LMCs have their budgets approved for the various projects to be undertaken, of course, one major requirement is for them to engage the communities. And of course, when they bring their proposal to the technical review committee, they really look at the minutes or the various meetings they've held with the communities for the buy-in, because at the training level, we indicated to them that you can't impose on them what you members of the community, members of the committee want. You need to get to the buy-in of the community. So to some extent, of course, we think that the papers that we've seen as well, we think that we should believe that these engagements are actually done. But of course, that again is not to say that we wouldn't welcome the engagement or trying to engage the communities. We welcome the idea. And of course, if all CSOs want to partner us, we are actually welcome. We've started this engagement with some already. For instance, wages, which we'll be doing some training program in the coming weeks with Pristia Takwa, I think Pristia Takwa and Wasa East, for instance, and Lembele as well, and trying to build the capacity of these LMCs. So, of course, we welcome every member, anybody who wants to engage or partner the Minerals Development Fund for the realization of our main mandate and objective. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Thanks so much. So we are grateful for the inputs that we have received. We'll revise portions of it. Essentially, what we're trying to do is to be able to hold the district assemblies accountable for the funds that they generate and that is disbursed to them. But we also have to ensure that the money is coming from someone. Yes, so we want to be able to hold the district accountable, but we also want to ensure that central government is responsible for its obligation to these assemblies by disbursing timeously. I hear the point by Joanna that the assemblies also have to up their game by generating revenue from the local taxes, and that should also feed into the broader work to ensure that we are supporting them to develop the right capacities that helps them to generate revenue and also remain accountable. I would at this point want to invite IBP to give us some closing remarks, and then we can go. So, Karim? Patrick.
Hi, Ben. I think we have another meeting that sort of ran forward this one. Karim, I think, has just jumped into the meeting.
Okay. All right.
Real quick. So first of all, I think we will thank the call for having made time for this. I think that the issues that have come up, I think, are issues that when we started this, spark engagement with you and WACAM and the other actors in the space, we sort of thought that there were front burner issues that had to be brought up. So I think these would be very very useful as far as the program design itself is concerned, but most importantly, how we can move the advocacy forward. And you clearly can tell that those who are, even from the conversation today, you find out those who are at the local level, either involved in planning or on the receiving end of services, that the local government, units are supposed to provide. They really understand. I mean, more often than not, we assume they don't, but I think they have a very fair understanding of what's going on. But it's the reach of the voice and the ability to sort of engage with the national level planning institutions that seems to have some gaps. So I think within that context, I would like to know, and since everybody else is on the call, what do next steps look like, for you and as far as this engagement is concerned, and what can we do from here? Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Patrick. I think the conversation has just begun, and the way forward is for us to really follow through the recommendations and also engage deeply at the community level through WACAM to ensure that we can change the trend and ensure that we can engineer development from the local level, ensuring that there is greater accountability and transparency around expenditures, and also central government can be held, to account for disbursement to those assemblies. So on our part, we would follow through the recommendations and have engagements with the stakeholders. We'll continue to engage the MDF Secretariat, the Ministry of Finance, and the OSL, and then also the administrator of the DACF, to ensure that we can iron out some of these challenges and ensure, timely and regular disbursement of the funds, to the assemblies, and also support the assemblies to really generate revenue. So this is just the beginning, generating the evidence and data for us to engage further. I would at this point want to thank all participants, our key stakeholders who have taken time to be here. We will come back to you again as the days and months roll by, so that we can, really exact action and ensure that we can develop our country and really give meaning to the decentralization agenda of the Constitution, if you like. So we are grateful for your time, and have a wonderful day.